Hey, fellow patriots, this is Kelly Jackson with TruthWire News, the best source for factual and accurate reporting in Middle Tennessee and beyond. Today, I have the distinct honor to host one of my very favorite people and one of the fiercest defenders for liberty in Tennessee, Executive
Oh,
Director. Well, it's true. Executive Director of Tennessee Stands and the leader of the robust conservative grassroots movement, Mr. Gary Humble. Thank you, Gary,
hi.
so much for being here with me. I so appreciate it.
Well, Kelly, thanks for having me on your new show. I am a subscriber to TruthWire News and thankful for your work, especially your focus on Williamson County. So I'm excited to be on your show.
Thank you. Well, somebody's got to tell them all the things that they don't want you to know on the county level, and that's my goal.
And you will.
Yeah, the mayor's not a fan. Let's just put it that way. So there's several things going on right now, and so I have a lot I want to cover. So let's just go ahead and it's on the state and the national level. So let's just go ahead and dig in.
Sure.
So recently, Tennessee Stands sent a legislative survey out to all of the your subscribers, and something that it's done perennially. It's in order to let the General Assembly, the Republicans specifically, know what their constituents' policy priorities are. What were some of the key takeaways from that survey, and what do you hope to see produced from sharing that information with our Republican supermajority?
Yeah, so this is the second time we've done this, and the goal we've began this effort sort of leading into a new General Assembly. So we did it in 2023, in the beginning of the 113th General Assembly. And
Yep.
so now we'll be providing it here coming into the beginning of 2025 for the beginning of the 114th. And the goal is that we get, responses from all across the state it's our audience is conservatives, so
Yeah.
this isn't a survey of the broader swath of Tennessee voters, though I will say
Yeah.
we have 77% of our survey respondents say they're Republicans, about
Okay.
14% independents, and then 9% Democrats, whatever else.
Really?
So
Okay.
yeah,
That's
so there's
good.
so we do have a little bit of a mixture in there, but it should be read more as
Right.
this is the working class conservative
Right.
voter in Tennessee.
Yeah.
But when you're approaching an 80% supermajority, that's really what the
Yeah.
legislature, that's who they need to hear from.
Yeah.
That's who's put them in office.
Yeah.
So we did that again this year. We've gotten over 3,800 responses. I'm excited because last time
Yeah.
we did it, we got responses from 92 counties, and this time we've got them from all 95 counties. So
Wow. That's great.
yeah, it's a robust survey, and we're talking about impacts on inflation, illegal immigration, Second Amendment, right to life,
Yeah.
medical freedom, election integrity.
Right.
So all the things, and we had 53 questions,
Okay.
and so we'll be coming some point in December, probably first part of December. We're getting the report designed right now. The survey is complete, and so we'll release that report for download to
Okay.
everyone in Tennessee. But we are going to print real nice and bind up printed copies, and we're going to hand deliver that to all 132 state legislators. So that's the goal is
Yeah.
here's what Tennessee voters
Yeah.
think.
I actually got
I,
the privilege of helping to distribute the very first one. So that was really
oh
fun.
yeah, I now that you say that, I remember the picture, but I had forgotten about that. Thank
Yeah,
you. That's
that
awesome.
was fun.
Yeah.
So
So the goal is
yeah,
to inform, because look, they'll be coming up in this legislature, they'll be going
yeah,
through some of those issues,
yeah.
so it's not necessarily, the survey is not saying, run bills on these issues.
Right,
We're just saying we know this is what sort of you're discussing. This is what
right,
people care about. So
right.
as you're going through this legislative process, here's what people
Yeah.
think on the issue, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And that's important because, as we know, they get together way ahead of time and determine which bills they're going to be sponsoring, who's going to carry what. And unfortunately, we also know they have those meetings about which bills are going to go to which committees and which ones may or may not make it through those committees. So I think it's imperative for them to understand, exactly what it is their constituents' priorities are if they want to be reelected in any future elections. So that's fantastic. Nobody else is doing it. So I mean, you can call them, you can email them, but they can always ignore that. But somebody showing up at their office and handing them a bound version of this is what your constituents are expecting from you is fantastic.
Yeah, and
So,
a couple of big high level takeaways.
mhm,
Tennesseans uh, at large do not feel that the General Assembly is doing enough to curb illegal immigration.
yep,
That is evident in the survey.
yeah,
We are a gun rights state.
yeah,
We are
yeah,
a firm right to life state. Tennesseans overwhelmingly
yeah.
want to see hand marked secured paper ballots
Wow.
used in our election.
Right.
And Tennesseans overwhelmingly support a constitutional amendment that would secure medical freedom here in
Okay.
the state of Tennessee and do away with all of these, CDC childhood
Yeah.
vaccination requirements here. And overwhelming support for that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of other stuff there, but those are just some big things I'm
Yeah.
thinking of off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think that we sort of have had our eyes opened in the wake of COVID, and especially with Bobby Kennedy Jr. sharing as much as of the information as he has shared about just regular vaccines. Forget COVID, just the makeup of every vaccine and what's in it. As a parent, if I'd known what I know now, my children would never have even gotten a single one. So I think this whole idea of bodily integrity and having the ability to say no for something for yourself or your kids and not feeling like you're going to be penalized or there are going to be any punitive consequences for it is just it's it is what freedom is. We need to be able to feel like we have that ability in America. So,
Yeah, the main premise here, it's that not only the mandate issue, but even the funding of messaging to say they're safe
yeah,
and effective, or even the recommendation of taking a shot for anything is
yeah,
just, I think most people would agree now
yeah,
that that is not within the purview of government.
no,
That's not within the purview of a state government, and so
right,
that's what we're looking for in a
right,
in a state constitutional amendment. Just to say this isn't part of your role.
right.
Do something else.
Well, and
So
that's what's the crazy. I think I read something recently about there being a case that sort of goes up the chain and overturns Jacobson because that was used just abusively during
yeah,
COVID.
absolutely.
And how old is that case? It's like over
1905. Yeah.
Yes, that's insane that they're still utilizing that precedent for something going on now. So that would be great if that could actually happen. So let's
Yeah.
jump to the voucher issue because session's coming, and of course this legislation, thank God, was defeated last session. Tennessee stands had a, if not the biggest role in that, a huge role in that. Um, and in just sort of activating the public to push back and tell the governor's office and all of the representatives who already had their minds made up, yeah, no, we're not doing that here. We already have school choice. It's called public school, private school, and homeschool. Hands off. But it's been reported recently that the governor might choose to call a special session to deal with the vouchers because despite all the dark money from organizations like Americans for Prosperity to elect the voucher friendly reps or to remove those who they saw as an impediment. I mean, we lost some really great state senators and representatives in our General Assembly that were just some of the most reliable conservatives. It would seem a special session is necessary because they still can't get it over the finish line, even though they have put all this money and effort into it. So Senator Jack Johnson and Senator and Representative William Lambert, they recently filed the voucher bill. So do you still think a special session is a possibility, or will they just try to move that through general session?
It's certainly a possibility. That as of right now, that talk has sort of died down a little bit.
Yeah.
The governor is sort of intimating that this may not happen, and It's lots of reasons, right? That could be. I would suspect that he doesn't have the juice to really get it done in a special session either. Look, the governor is not having a really good track record in terms
No.
of special sessions. He
Yeah.
he sort of wasted all of the change he may have had to
Yeah.
spend in terms of his leadership. He spent that on the red flag special
Yeah.
session.
Yeah.
And legislators showed up and did nothing.
Yeah.
Did almost absolutely nothing. They
Yeah.
talked about a few things, passed a couple of meaningless bills, and adjourned.
Yeah.
Which was a good outcome, right?
Yes.
But so I don't know that the governor really just has the juice to get this done, and
Yeah.
so it looks like we're not going to have a special session.
Okay.
So we'll see on that
That's
point.
great. My thoughts are why is he pushing this so hard? My thoughts would be possibly that he's thinking perhaps beyond his term. It ends in 2 years. We're going to be having a President Trump. I'm
He's running out of time to
He
get it
is. He is. He's running out of runway. So, otherwise he's just this he essentially is sort of this feckless, sort of weak, didn't really do much and never really lived up to the expectations that everybody anticipated that he would be, especially coming in at around the same time that President Trump did. Everybody sort of had this idea of, oh, he's not a politician, just like President Trump. And he has fallen way, way, way short of that.
Yeah,
So,
I'll bring up, on school choice with that, I want to bring up something from the survey. Our again over 3,800 responses, and I can't look. It's not a scientific survey, right? But
yeah.
it's over 3,800 responses from
Yeah.
Tennessee voters. A lot of these political surveys that folks like the Beacon Center and Americans for Prosperity are
Right.
running. You're talking about a sample size of maybe 250, 500 people,
Mm-hmm.
and they're running their low magic, and they're
Mm-hmm.
saying, that 60, 70% of Republicans support this. I think the Beacon Center said something like 50 something percent support it. That's just not true.
Mm-mm.
I've never experienced that in all of the conversations that we've had with people across the state.
Right.
But I will tell you this, I want to compare these two things because I think they're telling.
Sure.
Our survey shows that only 34% of Republicans in Tennessee support the governor's efforts for school choice. Now, that's an interesting statistic because in this recent election, our neighbors to the north
Yeah.
happened to have school choice
Yeah.
on their ballot
Yeah.
as a constitutional amendment. Now, I will say it is very, very rare to get an opportunity to see a piece of policy like this on
Right.
a ballot, right?
Right.
We typically don't, we have to depend on surveys and polls, but this was on the ballot in
Yeah.
Kentucky. Now people are going to say, well, Gary, Kentucky elects Democratic governors and they're and I get that
Yeah.
you can't compare these voters one to one. However,
Right.
I'll say this: Tennessee went 64% for Trump.
Yes.
Kentucky went 64.6% for Trump.
Right.
And in Kentucky, on the same ballot, where 64% of voters went for Trump,
Yeah.
only 35% of voters supported school choice, and
Okay.
their constitutional amendment failed. All
So,
right. And that's not close.
yeah.
That is a
No.
miserable
No.
failure.
And it's
Okay.
nowhere near.
So, what I want to compare is in Kentucky, on a ballot for a constitutional amendment, only 35% of voters support school choice. And our survey shows in Tennessee that only 34% of Republicans support school choice.
Yeah.
So, if you're comparing surveys and trying to
Yep.
get a sense on who do you think's closer? Maybe, you know, um,
Exactly.
I'm just not buying what the special interests are selling because
Oh,
they're the
absolutely
only
not.
ones I hear
Yeah.
rah rah and cheering on school
Yep.
choice.
Yep. And they're the only ones really lobbing insults too when you tell them they're wrong. I mean, they
Oh, of
really
course. So
get
they hate that.
upset. They
Yeah.
get they take it very, very personal. It's almost like their feelings get hurt and they just decide to call you names and it's like, well, then give me an argument for why you're right. They
That's right.
never, ever are able to produce that. All they are able to do is just throw insults, which tells me they
Well,
don't have
or
anything.
or an empty talking point like fund students, not systems.
Yep.
This is the only, parents should have more choices. Well,
Yep.
parents have a bunch of choices right
Yep.
now. The truth is, we just can't. Every parent can't afford maybe the
Right.
choices that they want. Kelly, I would love to know that I could send all three of my boys to
Yeah.
Yale. If I wanted to. Well, guess what? I can't.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I'm not going to ask the government to pay for it because
Right.
I can't choose
Right.
to send my kids to Yale. It's
Right.
just it's a very flawed argument.
Yes. Very, very, very flawed argument. In fact, I just was sitting in my own son's IEP meeting this morning, and we were talking about future options for him. And college, I know it's a different situation altogether, but that was something that was brought up. Is it's like, well, it was almost assumed he was going to go in, and there's all of the implications of that, all the money that we're going to have to spend to do it. And I'm like, yeah, just stop right there. Unless my children had full-blown scholarships for college, which none
Right.
of them got, we aren't doing that. We aren't doing that. We're going to go the junior college route. It's the most reasonable, and there are choices for us to do that. So,
We all have to make uh, economic decisions,
mhm,
personal economic decisions. And whatever the criteria is for you making those economic decisions for you personally, that does not mean that you don't have freedom
right,
or choice.
right.
That is a very wrong way to look. I mean, basically, what these people are saying is they believe in an entitlement program. They
Yes,
they want welfare for
yes,
because if because you should deserve to be able to choose to send your child where you want them to go, regardless maybe of your financial
right.
status or income. That's not liberty.
No,
Uh, and in any other genre outside of education, if you ask that same question to a conservative, they would agree with you. That's
right.
that's not liberty. But
No.
here, but Kelly, it's for the kids, for the kids. So
It's
this
really good.
is
It's
this is
that's
freedom.
that's sort of like looking at marriage or abortion as a right. Kind of don't remember those being in the Constitution.
Yeah.
Those things are not a right. A lot of things are privileges. So you can't assume that you're entitled to everything. Since we're on the topic of vouchers, and you put out a really great and informative video that I'm gonna make sure that I attach to the post when I publish this. But you did a great video on some of the issues that you saw with the legislation that was just filed. So, what do you see as some of the hidden concerns that you discovered with the Education Freedom Act of 2025, particularly regarding the standardized testing requirements for private schools and then of course, the increased government spending?
Yeah. So I actually want to, on the standardized testing piece, I want to correct myself. This is my opportunity to issue kind of a correction. So I incorrectly stated on the video that the private school would have to elect both a national standardized test and an annual TCAP exam. That was inaccurate. It's
Okay.
they are now required to do a standardized test where they're not required now, but they pick one or the other. So
Okay.
the school either has the choice of choosing some nationally standardized test or
Okay.
the TCAP examination. But here's the thing. So first off, the bigger issue though is that there are standardized testing requirements that will
Right.
be thrust on a private school that they
Right.
currently do not have now. And
Right.
so which brings up all the conversation about, well, what does teaching to the test look like now for that
Right.
school? So that's an issue.
Right.
But in terms of another interesting thing about the national standardized test
Hmm.
is it says that private schools can choose the test, but it also says as set forth by
Right.
the rules of the State Board of Education. And
Right.
you'll see that phrase all throughout this bill. So,
Yeah.
you can spend the money on curriculum and
Hmm.
tuition and travel fees and computer and tech,
Yep.
but as applied to the rules promulgated by the
Hmm.
State Board of Education. So
Right.
the big thing for everyone to know right now is we don't know what all of
Right.
those rules are yet, and we won't.
No,
It's like the Nancy Pelosi, sort
gotta,
of, pass the bill and see what's in it
right.
later.
Right.
Um, I mean, every bill, I say that, I want to acknowledge every bill the legislature passed, there are typically rules promulgated after the fact.
After.
It's
Right.
not unusual.
Right.
But my point is, we do not know right now
Right.
what future requirements or regulations might be required by the Department of Education per this new law, because the rules will be promulgated at a later date.
Right.
And what's also important to point out there, that also means that future or any increased regulatory scheme that may
Yes.
come over the private schools does not necessarily have to come by way of new legislation in the
Right.
future.
Right.
It may simply come by future rulemaking,
Yeah.
which
Yep.
99.9% of voters in Tennessee will never know
Never
anything
know.
about.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very,
Yep.
it is a public process that happens in the GovOps committee,
Yeah.
but
But
only the insiders even know that that's
right.
happening or going on.
Right. I get that a lot too. People have said to me, "Well, I'll post something," and they'll say, "But wait a minute. Shouldn't they have had to do legislation for that?" And I explained to them, no, that is not how it works. They pass the legislation and then they promulgate new rules. And those new rules, as you said, unless you're really paying attention, and it isn't like they help you up there at Cordell Hull pay attention to what they're doing. They
Right.
don't want you to pay attention to what they're doing. So, I
Oh,
mean,
they hate what you and I are doing right now.
absolutely, they hate it. They hate it, which is why we love it. It's a lot of reason why we love it. But I really, I think that's part of the reason why you and I both do what we do, is we're trying to educate people to understand how their government actually works versus how they think it works or how they were taught it works, because so much is left out of that education as we go through school.
Yeah, absolutely. And so on that note, it's worth saying that this bill, not only do we need to worry about the future rulemaking, but this bill implicitly
Mhm.
gives the state board of education, the State Department, a lot of ability and a lot of power to promulgate rules. I mean, the
Yeah.
whole thing talks about the promulgation of rules.
Yeah.
So um, again, you will see new requirements coming down the pike,
Yeah.
and they will have nothing to do with legislation. The
Right.
legislature won't ever have to talk about this again.
No. No.
Outside of that, which I think is a major concern, some of the budgetary stuff's ridiculous. This equity almost promise to give every teacher in the state a $2,000 bonus. I mean, what a crock. Like I
Yeah.
said in my video, do a lot of teachers probably deserve bonuses? Sure. Does every teacher deserve a $2,000 bonus? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So why, and how should educators feel, honestly,
Right.
that they're being used as a trinket? Like,
Yeah.
why aren't they already getting raises if
Right.
they're teaching well? That
Right.
should already be a thing, right? We should
Right.
be rewarding great educators, but no,
Right.
they're being used as a pawn, as a chess piece. And if we give them all 2 grand, maybe we can
Yeah.
get school districts on board.
Yeah.
That's that should be They should be really frustrated about that, quite
Yes.
honestly.
Well, and I'm sure that not that they would probably ever say it out loud, but I'm sure they know which teachers work hard and actually would deserve something like
Yes,
that.
they
And
do.
they know the ones that don't. And if it was me and I worked really hard and I put in the extra effort and I really went above and beyond for my students. And I mean, as a mother, my children have always been in public school. I can think of all of the teachers who were that and the ones
Oh
that
yeah, I
weren't.
remember them still. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And if it were me and I were one of those teachers who did the work and was worked so hard, I'd be pissed that
Right.
everybody's getting the same reward and they're not. It's socialism. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's socialism. So
It
they,
is a demotivator for sure
yes,
to those who are
absolutely.
putting in the work.
Right, right. Why should you work harder when that guy who's not working nearly as hard is going to get the same? It
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense. So one of the other things I wanted to cover, and there was a recent article in the news because everybody's starting to cry about how there's language in the bill that attempts to exclude illegal aliens from having illegal alien children,
Right.
children from getting access to the vouchers. And I know that it was a major bone of contention last session, but they managed to get language in the bill this time around. So I figure they were probably going to get sued anyway, but I imagine this ratchets that up like tenfold because I remember what happened with the ESAs when the governor attempted to do that and they just languished in litigation
Mhm.
for, I don't know, over a year. So, yeah, we all believe they shouldn't get access to it, but the reality is considering Plyler versus Doe and that's the precedent, that's going to throw another monkey wrench into things.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so how
yeah.
do you see that playing out? I guess
Here's some
is my
here's
thought.
some thoughts on that. So actually, the language this year on that particular point is different, but it's not new. The language restricting this being available to illegals was in the bill last year. The problem was,
Right.
especially in the view of Todd Warner's questioning in the K through 12 committee,
Right.
the issue is that the commissioner of education could not explain in any way, shape, or form how they were going to accomplish that task. Because,
Right.
as you stated, with the Plyler versus Doe thing,
Yeah.
is you can't really distinguish if public education is available to a
Right.
student based on their immigration status
Right.
per this federal ruling,
Right.
which by the way is a whole other issue because we're not
Yeah.
talking about federal law here. We're talking about
No.
a court ruling. So that I
Right.
won't get into to that
A bad
why
Supreme
we
Court.
shouldn't be following this at all,
Right. Exactly.
right? But let's
Right.
just set that aside for another day.
Yeah.
Um, Outside of the fact that I'm not exactly sure how they're going to accomplish that, and neither are they.
Yeah.
I will say, to me, they have made some. They've had to give up the ghost a little bit on this, so they've made some strides in terms of doing it. But in order to accomplish the goal, they had to legally, and this is the beautiful part of it, they had to legally define school choice as welfare.
Wow.
So
Okay.
if you look in the bill, it is actually legally defined and administrated as what they
Yeah.
call a state and local public benefit
Okay.
per state law and federal law. So that's the
Yeah.
kicker.
Yeah.
State and local public benefits, in other words, welfare programs,
Right.
are not mandated to be available to illegal immigrants. So
Right.
the way that they're accomplishing this goal is by Kelly calling it what it actually is. It's a welfare program,
Yeah.
and by virtue of legally distinguishing it as a welfare program,
Yeah.
they do have some legal grounds
Yeah.
to restrict access to undocumented people, illegal aliens. Yeah.
Yeah. Which actually might end up working well for us in a way because if they initiate a lawsuit that sends it all the way up, perhaps something that could end up getting Plyler, perhaps the Roe treatment, maybe we overturn, maybe it could be used as a
Well,
vehicle
yeah,
possibly to
and I
overturn.
don't know if this bill's the vehicle, but what you just said though, that is the point. What the
Yeah.
state should be doing,
Yeah.
instead of spending the over $600 million we currently spend annually specifically on illegals in K through 12
Yeah.
education, what we should be doing is stopping it and
Yes.
passing legislation that will take us to court so that
Right.
we can argue the insanity of Plyler versus Doe. But see,
Right.
that's what they don't do,
They
right?
don't.
And those are the things that we should be doing as a state government.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean,
So,
we've been doing this since the 80s.
yes,
This is a
80,
1982 decision,
yeah, 82.
and like nobody cares.
Yeah.
We just keep doing it.
Yeah.
Um, anyway,
Yeah. We do.
I
No, you're right.
digress.
It's the definition. What is that? The definition of
That's
sanity.
40 years, Kelly. 40 years we've been doing this
The
because
definition.
some court said so.
Yes. And it was a bad Supreme Court. That was a really bad Supreme Court at the time. So as long as we're on education, a big announcement, which it's not really a new announcement because President Trump had been saying if he got reelected, he was going to lock up the Department of Ed, federal Department of Ed is going away. I'm going to send all of that money and decision-making power back to the states where it belongs. So, which to me seems like it has even bigger implications on things like where and how our ed dollars are spent and who manages that. And so, what implications, considering we know who these people are, which also is a conversation for another day, but how is that going to even impact this whole discussion around vouchers? Or I don't even know how much of the money that we get for education in Tennessee comes from the federal government.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit. Well, it's huge. So, if you recall, Kelly, I ran for state senate in
yes,
2022. Do you
yes,
remember that?
sir. Yes, sir.
Well, there are some folks out there that have pulled some little sentences from my old website in a video,
Yes.
and are trying to push the message that I ran on school choice,
Yeah.
and now I've changed my tune. The fact of the matter is there was never a
Nope.
day or a dollar spent in my entire campaign on
Right.
school choice. I didn't
Nope.
care, and at that time, neither did anybody else, because
No.
that wasn't the issue of the day.
No.
But what I never failed to talk about at every single event that I did,
Yeah.
did over 50 of them in a 4-month period,
Yep.
I talked about four things. One of them was the best thing Tennessee could do
Yep.
is get federal dollars out of our
Out.
education system.
Yeah.
So right now, when you look at state education as a whole, about 10% of the money spent on education at the
Mhm.
state level comes from the federal government.
Okay. Wow.
And when you think about, so K through 12 is about a $10 billion expenditure. It's a big part of the
Wow.
budget. When you calculate all of education
Right.
in our budget, Tennessee spends about 36 cents on every dollar on education in the state of Tennessee. So it
Wow.
is the single largest portion of our budget. In terms of K through 12, that's roughly $10 billion, and
Okay.
about 10% of that on roughly is coming from the federal government.
Yeah.
I when you're talking about $1 billion, I think Tennessee is in a financial position
Yeah.
that it actually could uh, get federal money out of education. And Senator Janice Bowling, at the time I was talking to her about this 2 years ago now, she said
Mhm.
something that I had not heard. She said, it's even more than that, though. It's not just that we can afford to get rid of the 10%.
Right.
It's that the remaining 90% of what we're spending, some of that money is required spending so that we meet the requirements to get the 10% from the federal government.
Oh
So
my
if we
gosh.
rejected the money, there's even another portion of money that we don't have to spend on things so that we qualify for the money that we don't want anyway. I mean,
Oh my
so
gosh.
there's no question in my mind that as fiscally, look, there's one thing our legislature does do a decent job at.
Yeah.
They run a mean budget. Now
Yes.
there's a lot of pork in there. Don't get me wrong. There's
Yeah.
things
We
that
could
aren't good,
still. Mm-hmm.
but in general, when you compare us, when you put us up against another state,
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking good. We got a
Yes.
2 billion or some odd dollar rainy day
Yes.
fund.
Yep.
Tennessee can do this, and it can lead the way in showing other states how to do this.
Yeah.
So I think what President Trump is proposing is phenomenal,
Yeah.
and I think when he talks, it's not just funding.
Right.
When he talks about getting rid of the U.S. Department of Education, I think
Yeah.
President Trump is signaling we do not want the federal government
Right.
in any way telling
Mm-mm.
states how to educate children. It's
Yes.
outside of our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
It's unconstitutional. We're going to
Yeah.
stop doing it.
Yeah.
So that's a great outlook to have from this new
Yeah.
administration, and I think a lot of Americans see it that way.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful we make some strides towards that direction.
So am I. I think everybody is sort of, considering his first term and the decisions that were made relatively early on about, the people that surrounded him. And nobody's perfect. I mean, let's be honest. I don't think that there are really enough solid conservatives that would satisfy all of us in the grassroots.
No.
But I think with some of the decisions I've seen so far, I'm relatively satisfied. I kind of need to see I know everyone's going to have a past, especially in this new administration. If you look at some of the people he has surrounded himself with, for heaven's
Yeah.
sakes, Bobby
There's a lot of
Kennedy.
concerns about his chief of staff, with her former
Yes.
medical, big pharma lobbying
Yes.
experience and
But
things
what
like
I
that.
but what I'd like to know is a lot of people who have those backgrounds in the last 3 to 4 years have had their eyes opened.
Right. Do they feel the same? Yeah.
Right. So I'm hopeful that that's the case. And I've been saying this to people every time we've had this discussion is imagine if the Lord had told everybody ahead of time, you know what? I have this guy and I just think he's going to be an amazing ambassador for my son, Jesus Christ. His name is Saul of Tarsus. And I'm just going to send him out there and
What, Saul, that
yeah,
guy? No
exactly.
way.
Exactly. Without having an understanding that he had plans for Saul's big trip to Damascus on that road. So I'm just really hoping that when he says, I'm making better decisions, that we see that come to fruition and we don't all sort of run around with our hair on fire when we read something or we hear something. We
True.
wait to sort of see evidence of it.
Let's
And
see the proof.
then, yes, and then we can you know, have a game plan for holding people accountable for things.
You shall know them by their what?
Their fruits,
Mhm.
absolutely, 100%. So, speaking of the legislative session that's coming up, and we talked about priorities with the survey. But in light of this historic reelection of President Trump and this focus, especially on a lot of the buzz is around make America healthy again. And everybody's very excited about the upgrade to RFK Jr. from that man
Yeah.
woman that's running it now. So, what are your thoughts about that? Some of the things that he's talked about. I know they've talked about yanking the fluoride out of the water, those kinds of things.
So I'm hopeful that this new administration will be informative to a group of legislators that, quite frankly, they say they're all Trump supporters and everything's
Oh,
about
yeah.
Trump. So I think, but this is an agenda though that to
Yeah.
somewhat it's been contrary. You've been
Oh,
you doing
yeah.
some of this with us like for the last
Yep.
4 years
Yep.
in terms of pushing medical freedom. I mean, we can't even secure religious exemptions in an epidemic
Right.
here in the state of Tennessee. That gets killed every year.
Right.
And we had to kick and scream for a special session, on COVID. And of course, they only dealt with the
Yep.
COVID shot, and they bowed to the federal government for federal
Mm-hmm.
contractors and CMS in terms of healthcare. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot that we haven't been able to win on there. But now you've got an
Yep.
administration, for example, like you say,
Mm-hmm.
the fluoride thing's interesting. RFK publicly tweeted
Yep.
before the election that he and Trump already had a plan to get
Yep.
fluoride out of the entire water supply.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I had a month prior to
Yeah.
that, I wrote a commentary on the California court ruling that
Mm-hmm.
RFK mentioned. It's a federal court ruling that's
Yep.
forcing the EPA
Yep.
to reconsider its fluoride standards based on all of this new research.
Right.
And so what we did was based on that court ruling, we already have I think we've almost got a bill sponsor nailed down,
That's great.
but we've already got a bill drafted to submit that will restrict any utility from fluoridating water
Wow.
because per the court ruling, essentially the consensus was any fluor at any level,
Mm-hmm.
the fluoridation of water, while it may not, while at some levels you may not be able to prove that it's harmful,
Right.
the court reasoned that any amount of fluoridation presents with a quote unreasonable risk.
Risk.
In other
Yeah.
words, there are zero benefits
Benefit.
at this point. You put fluoride in water, there can only be risk. So
Wow.
why do it? And why would we allow anyone just based on their own perception? For example, and I'll be kind here. She was a really nice woman. So I've been on this, by the way. I called and spoke to the woman that is in charge of fluoridating water for all of Williamson County.
Wow.
All
Okay.
right. So most people may not know this.
Yeah.
They're out of West Nashville. They're called the Harpeth Valley Utility District.
Okay.
And a couple of things I didn't know. One, the Harpeth Valley Utility District provides all of the water supply. Even like
Mhm.
I'm in an area of Williamson County that we're on Mill Crofton, but I
Right.
called Mill Crofton and they buy all of their water from the Harpeth Valley Utility District. All right.
Okay.
So they
Right.
supply all of Williamson County. And did you know that every drop of water you get in Williamson County comes out of the Harpeth River? I didn't know that,
I
but that's
did. I actually did know that. I knew that because I have been actually looking into this whole issue with the water table.
so
So,
so that was new to me. But so I'm having a conversation about fluoridating water with her, and her personal belief is she was very kind. We had a
yeah,
great conversation, but she's going to do whatever the EPA and the CDC recommend. That's what she's going to do. And so you've got what? Almost we're nearing 280,000 residents now in Williamson County, and our entire water supply is dependent on the fact
yeah,
that one woman
one woman.
is deciding that she's going to follow the EPA recommendations.
Mm,
But
mm,
meanwhile, there are 14 water districts throughout the state of Tennessee,
mm.
not since this ruling, but at other
Right,
points in time, have
right.
stopped fluoridating water.
Really interesting.
Yeah. One of the most recent ones was in Soddy Daisy, north of Chattanooga. My whole
Yeah.
point is whether or not our water is fluoridated shouldn't be left up to the opinion of someone.
No, no.
This, if anything, deserves to be regulated and,
Yeah.
and come under the auspices of our state representatives.
Right.
I think this would be one of those things.
Yeah.
So we need the legislature to make a decision.
Yeah.
And my ask is don't put it in the water.
Right. And you would think, I would think, if they're so on board with President Trump and his initiatives to make America healthy again, that they'll actually listen to that
That
ask.
they'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
so where I'm actually hopeful that we get I think we will get some support from RFK on this.
That's great.
And I think you're going to see a national push
Mm-hmm.
this kinds of legislation. So look, the supermajority and the governor always talk about Tennessee leading the nation.
Yes.
Well, we've got a great
Let,
opportunity
let's
to,
do
to
it.
lead the nations here. Let's lead the nation.
Let's do it. Let's get it
Um,
done.
and I'm hopeful. We're working to see that a constitutional amendment on medical freedom gets filed. Again, really simple that the state has no purview to require any
Yeah.
vaccinations at all, and that
Wow.
we need to
That would be
drop all of this CDC nonsense and
right.
return this to truly these are decisions between patients and their
Right.
doctors.
Right.
And I think that is a position that is supported by RFK. I think we'll
Yes.
see. It will be interesting to see how
Yeah.
far the Trump administration goes with its communication on this issue. I'm not. I'm
Right.
not sure how far they'll go.
Right.
But we're going to try to get this filed and see what happens.
Yeah.
Our survey shows. I think it's a no-brainer that
Right.
most of Tennessee voters don't want someone else telling them that they need
No.
to have a vaccine.
Right.
Period. Doesn't
Right.
matter what it is.
And I think despite the efforts around COVID and the vaccine, I think considering the push to return everything to the states, everything
Right.
as much as possibly can be sent back to the states, I think that would be something that would be fully, it goes with the theme. If we're going to send it, let's send it all. Let us all truly determine each state that we live in. Let the states figure it out. That way the people really have more of an impact because we're much closer to our state representatives than we are to our congressmen
That's
or
right.
the president. I tell people that all the time. You can't go to DC and show up to your congressman's office next week. Oh, but you can drive into Nashville and you can walk right into Cordell Hull and you can go to your congressman's or your senator's office or your representative's office and show your face. They're not used to that.
Yeah.
When you do it, it makes an impact. And especially if they know you have influence over other people that they know vote for them. It
And
really
actually,
doesn't take that many.
as you say that in terms of the states, that's probably the direction that I would see the Trump administration going. Is that, for example, I think they would push for CD recommendations
Mhm.
to go away,
Yeah.
and the message would be let state health departments determine,
Yeah.
what what, if any, requirements they're
Right,
going to make in their own state. This is not a federal issue.
right, right.
I think Trump would probably message similar to how he's messaged on
Yeah,
abortion under Roe v. Wade.
right.
This is not a federal issue.
No,
Let's leave this to the states. That's
yeah.
probably the direction
Which
they may go.
is sort of how we were asking them to go with COVID, because different parts of the state always had different levels of infection or whatever, however they were measuring them. To create a mandate that goes across the board for every place all at one time is insane. So
Right.
it just makes sense for us to be able to manage it ourselves. So I have to ask, this Senate Majority Leader vote coming up on day after tomorrow. Word is, I haven't checked X in the last 45 minutes, but word is that Tennessee Senators Blackburn and Haggerty are not listening to their constituents so much
Nope.
as they're listening to Ward Baker.
Yeah,
Who is
except for Haggerty though, Kelly. That's Haggerty. Jack Posobiec. Is that how you say his
Yes,
name?
yeah, Sobek, yeah,
So Jack Posobiec, what started all this on in the X world
yeah.
is Jack Posobiec released a leaked whip count vote
Mm-hmm.
because the problem, as you well know, they're
Yeah.
looking to do a secret ballot,
Oh, yes. And that, from
which
what I understand, that's tradition because blah, blah, blah. You got to work with the guy who gets the job. And, there, we don't want any hard feelings, blah, blah,
I don't want him mad at me or but
blah. Yeah, that's more important than your constituents. Okay.
but that
Mhm.
private whip count was released, and so Jack Posobiec put that out. So according to that document, Marsha Blackburn is stated to be supporting John Thune,
Mhm.
but Bill Haggerty is supporting Rick Scott.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's
so
great.
this is for Tennessee, this is a Marsha Blackburn issue
Yeah.
predominantly, and the list as a whole showed that Scott is a distant third.
Oh, yes.
He's only got 11 votes according to this list.
Yeah.
So we are pushing
Yeah.
Tennesseans very hard to call Marsha's office.
Yep.
And some of the inside baseball, as you stated,
Yeah.
Ward Baker, of course he runs Marsha's campaign.
Yeah.
I sort of call him her handler.
Yes.
So
I would say that's true.
two things on Ward Baker, which one of them is something Jack Posobiec pointed out.
Hmm.
He called Ward Baker out nationally.
Yes.
Is that I don't know all the details, but apparently Ward was running an opposing campaign to Rick Scott and is ferociously opposed to Rick Scott in Florida.
So it's personal
It's
for Ward.
person.
Ward is butthurt, so
That's
he
right.
has an issue.
That's
Okay.
right. The other thing which we put out is this has been reported for a long time. I pulled an article from 2019 on the Tennessean, but Ward Baker cut his teeth back in the day with the Mitch McConnell campaign. So
Well,
he's a Mitch McConnell guy.
so he's an OG swamp creature.
That's right. So
Yeah.
that makes more sense
Yep.
when you see that affiliation with Marsha and the direction that she's going. She needs to listen to the people of Tennessee, and I think not only America but also in Tennessee, people want Rick Scott.
They do.
And that's not to say Rick Scott is the best option
No.
in total.
Yeah.
He's perfect, but when you're looking at these three options, it's not
Right.
even a contest.
Right.
Rick
Right.
Scott is the guy.
Yes, absolutely, no doubt. Now, there was some talk about JD Vance being the vice
Saw that.
president. He would be the president of the Senate. And John Adams, what is it, 200 years ago, he was
Yep.
also the president of the Senate, as well as the Senate Majority Leader.
So there's
So
precedent.
there is precedent for that. So I don't know if that is something that they would do, but I think that would be everybody's number one choice. If we can't get that done, then definitely Rick Scott.
Well, JD Vance, by the way, is currently supporting Rick Scott.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So yeah, so I guess it is a Marsha problem. Who treats the grassroots like the gum on the bottom of her shoe?
There's
the
no
majority
question.
of the time.
And we know that well here in Williamson
Oh,
County.
very well.
She could give a rip about I think everybody in the country should know that in her home county,
Yep.
this woman could care less about grassroots conservatives
Yep.
here in her county. She treats us like dirt.
Yep.
We're not worthy.
Nope.
We're
Uh,
not worthy of her presence.
oh, well, no, because when at the Reagan Day dinner this last year, I went to cover it as a reporter. I was invited by, and my ticket was covered, and I got to go and I got to cover it. And, Senator Cruz was there. It was great. It was a really great event. Afterward, everyone stuck around that was there, everybody. Congressman Green stuck around, Representative Ogle stuck around, Senator Cruz stuck around, taking pictures, shaking hands, visiting with people. The second that our county chair ended the evening from the stage, thanks for everybody for coming. Have a good evening. The second he was done, she was up. Her people, they were her entourage, and they were out the door. She
Wow.
had absolutely no desire to, you know,
Well,
deal with
Kelly,
the rabble.
she's very important and very busy. I mean, you can't fault her for that. She's got other
Yeah.
things to do
Yeah. Well,
than be with the constituents in her home county.
yeah. God. It's just so gross. It's just so gross. So, is there anything that we didn't cover that you really want to convey to my viewers? And also, I want to make sure everybody knows where we find you, where we can see all of the latest things that Tennessee Stands is working on, and how to stay up to date.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's TennesseeStands.org, and so the biggest thing is as we come into see we're November now, right?
Mhm.
So January 14th is the beginning of the 114th General Assembly.
Yeah,
So for folks who aren't subscribed to TennesseeStands.org, we
yeah.
ask them to do that because we are maybe the largest, I guess. You're
Yes.
not going to get any more alerts about state
No.
legislation than from Tennessee Stands.
Yeah.
So. And we make it really, really, really easy
Really easy.
for folks to take action and communicate.
Yeah.
Stupid easy, guys,
Yeah.
to
I would
communicate
say
with your
that's true.
legislators. So I hope people engage with us to do that. And of course, Freedom Matters podcast and the Tennessee
Yeah.
Legislative Report Card, keep posted on all those things because the great thing about what we do coming into into a new session
Yeah.
where the front end is the advocacy. So we're
Yeah.
working to get people engaged,
Yep.
communicate, oppose, support different bills. But then on the other side, we have the Tennessee Legislative Report Card.
Yeah.
And so we report then all of those
Right.
activities and how legislators across the state scored on
Right.
those. So we create a bookend, it's
Right.
like do
Right.
the work up front and once we're
Right.
done, here's what happened.
Right.
And we're doing that work. So I would just ask people to engage
Yes.
the process. It's called self-governance.
Yes. Yes,
And we
sir.
should be doing that.
Absolutely. And I would also like to plug, as somebody who does it myself, I would also encourage everybody to just consider making a monthly donation to Tennessee Stands. I mean, for criminy sakes, if you're going to pay $5, say you go to Starbucks every day and spend $7 or $8 a day on a cup of coffee, ditch your latte and save that money and donate it towards your
It's really bad for you.
freedom.
Right.
It's easy to do.
Thank you for that.
Uh, Thank you so much, Gary, for being with me. And everyone, if you enjoyed this conversation and you want more, please, please, please like and subscribe. And of course, share, share, share. And thanks, everyone. Until next time, God bless you and God bless America. Thanks, everybody.